Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Big Ten Mafia Show. I am your host, Sergeant Pickles, for the evening. Becky is on her way to Vegas for, I believe, a softball event, and Moen has been holding down the fort for every show under the sun for quite a few times now, and I'm going to give him a little bit of a break this week. So it's just us and everyone in chat. It was an awesome weekend, so we got a lot to talk about, but feel free to throw everything into comments. If my audio cuts out at all, it's because I have noisy neighbors and everything, but I appreciate everyone being here. Hello to early crowd. Ryan Willie was in here early. I know you were crowing at me about Washington and Iowa. We will get there, and rightfully so. It was an absolute bloodbath. So go ahead and do a little victory dance at the Huskies' expense on this one. Bob Swinger, good evening, my friend. How are we doing? Illini Ted, we will certainly talk about your fight in Illini, and I know it's a pseudo rivalry of sorts, but man, that game, although it had an exciting finish, it should never have been that close. But as you comment there, excited to see Indiana play a team with a pulse this week. Yep. Jan Hulk, all the way from Slovenia. Good evening, my friend. How are we doing? And we'll get right into it. It was a fun-filled college football weekend. I didn't have a chance to watch a ton of the games live as, family duty calls and such. But absolutely made appointment viewing for that Ohio State-Oregon game. No secret, I was cheering against the Ducks for the Buckeyes, but it was just a fantastic game. There was some weird plays that happened, some discipline issues that we can talk about, but I thought it would definitely be good to go ahead and start with just a score recap of the weekend. And I'll go ahead and dive into it. Ryan Willie, he can have his moment in the sun, but we will show the Washington-Iowa game. And my goodness, Washington, it's tough. Well, there's been definitely a ton of teams losing in those 2 time zone shifts as they go across country. But, oh, my gosh, you put absolutely nothing together. And at one point, this was like a 20-10 game. Washington was coming back, and Will Rogers throws an interception. It was absolutely brutal. And it felt like, despite the final score, Iowa absolutely deserves to win. Iowa absolutely deserved to win in the end. I mean, the starters were pulled in the fourth quarter. It was so bad. Washington was just done. But they had a chance to get into that game. And conundrum, I don't mean to make it an excuse. I'm just noticing a trend. Teams traveling both to the West Coast and from the West Coast are now a combined 3-10. So it's not just Washington. All sorts of teams are losing. And that trend was broken this week a little bit by Penn State and Minnesota. But otherwise, only one team had won going cross country. And I just think it's a factor. It's no excuse to put up that kind of performance for the Huskies. They played like absolute trash. And once Iowa started to lean on them, it was terrible. But Washington started out the game strong. They drove the field. They got right down to the end. And they were looking poised to put up 7 to start the game. And a penalty killed them. And then their kicker, they've had kicking issues the last few weeks, their kicker absolutely blew it. Because even going up 3-0, it's not the start you wanted, given you got a penalty inside the red zone. But that's been the MO for the Huskies. It absolutely has. That's been the MO for the Huskies, is that they get down to the red zone, they can make yards, they can make plays, and you can see it there. Will Rogers doesn't have great stats. I think he has at least 1 pick on there, but he still put up 195 yards. And they were able to move the ball down the field and make nothing out of it. Washington actually, even though they lost to that score, Washington had more total yards than Iowa even at the end of the game. So they were able to move the ball. And Iowa's known that they clamped down in the red zone. Full credit to them. Like I said, after halftime, Iowa absolutely ran away with it. They deserved to win. They crushed the Huskies and just took all the air, out of the ball for Washington. But UW had a chance to get themselves back in the game and make it 17-20, competitive game, and they blew it. They had opportunities and they blew it, and then Iowa ran away with it when, the Huskies were deflated. So, Conundrum, tell you about the Hawkeyes defense again. It's still good. It's not as good as last year. I mean, Washington still put up yards. They still moved the ball down the field, and Ohio State did as well. they're still good. It's not that they've suddenly fallen off a cliff. They were just at such a high standard, high peak last year that matching that level of defense back-to-back seasons in a conference as deep as this is going to be really tough. Conundrum, I would say it's silly only in the sense that it was mostly off of turnovers. Like I said, Iowa didn't lead the Huskies in yardage, so it wasn't like they were just crushing the Husky defense. They moved the ball, and what do? They pound the rock, and Johnson broke 2 or 3 pretty good-sized runs, but they just grind you out. And the Huskies' mistakes absolutely – the Iowa deserved to win. I think Iowa was going to win anyway, given the way the game was going, but the turnovers and mistakes by the Huskies led the score to be as lopsided as it was. So full credit to Iowa. I'll take my licks, and that's kind of what I get for, most weeks I'll pick my Huskies, but I won't really give a score, but I thought that they were going to have a shot to win big, and I'm going to have to eat my shoe on that one. Got a couple more people filing into Earl Carr. Hello, my friend, channel member. Good to see you. Tony Lashin, do you think Rutgers is better than Iowa? I think it really depends. They're like kind of mirror images of one another. I'd say Rutgers has a more capable quarterback because, McNamara, he threw his first touchdown in a Power 5 game, and I forget how it was, since like 2021, I think they said on the stat card. Embarrassing for my Huskies, of course, but it was like a 3-yard swing pass that the dude then ran for another 15 yards. So he's not exactly putting up air yards. Kaliak-Manis makes mistakes, but he can at least throw it enough to complement Monangai. So obviously, I think home field advantage is a big deal, but on a neutral field, I would have Rutgers a slight edge currently. And we can talk about it. Rutgers went to Wisconsin. I don't recall my pick for the game. I thought it was going to be a close game, so that's bad on me. But Wisconsin handled business. I was really, really surprised. For a road game, huge road game, and you kind of expected, okay, Monangai is going to get runs. It's going to be kind of a slow, grinding game, that the way they want to play. But holy cow, Wisconsin was just running roughshod all over them from the jump. And Rutgers didn't score until the fourth quarter. Like it could have absolutely been a shutout. I couldn't believe that they weren't at least able to get something going. And even if the score was lopsided in Wisconsin's favor, like not scoring until the fourth quarter is absolutely nuts. Illini Ted say, getting back to the travel things, 2 of those 3 wins are against teams playing at UCLA. Correct. Yeah. UCLA is just really bad. And the other one was Ohio State at Oregon. So again, it's not just Washington. Like Oregon's going to have to travel cross country soon. USC struggled cross country. Like I think it's a struggle for anyone to adjust to just how different it is, because Washington to Tucson is actually further than to Nebraska, but your same time zone travel in north-south. And Washington traditionally had a really terrible record playing in the state of Arizona. So I know that these are like semi-professionals now, but travel is travel. It wears on you. And I think it's tough for anyone, especially in a close game. It can make a slight edge. Conundrum, it was the pink locker rooms that did it. I saw the pictures. I've heard of the pink locker rooms. I'm sure I've seen pictures in the past. It's not that they're pink that bothers me. It's that it's a really disgusting shade of pink. It's like pink that faded in the sun too long. Maybe that's the point. It's not supposed to make you feel passive. It's just supposed to be really gross looking. But I will say the Iowa equipment manager posted a picture, and Washington players, gracious in defeat, left the place absolutely spotless and got a kudos from him. So I'm glad that they're showing some good sportsmanship. They know they got beat on the day, and they're returning the visitor locker room better than how they found it. So it may have been the pink locker rooms, but honestly, Iowa had it together. It was a Kirk Ferentz' 200th win, and they were able to execute in those key moments, and the Huskies didn't. And then when the Huskies just mentally got out of the game, because it went up, I believe, 23 or 27-10, it was just over at that point. Iowa started running away with it. You have 3 West Coast teams winning on the road this week. We will certainly look at the games coming up, but that would be a massive accomplishment, Tony. We'll see. It's been tough. It's been really, really tough. My last excuse, if you want to say this is my excuse for Washington, you guys can make fun of me. It's all good. But I will say the week after playing Michigan in the rematch at home and how emotional that win was, and you beat them on your home field and everyone is storming the field, I should have kind of seen it coming that they weren't going to play at their peak going into Iowa. That it made perfect sense for that to be kind of a trap game and a letdown, because they put so much energy into beating Michigan. It's huge for them. You just played them in the national championship, and and they got a bye week coming up next week, so maybe they're looking forward to the rest. That's the only excuse I'll make. They should have executed better. Iowa absolutely deserved the win and played better on the day, so full credit to the Hawkeyes. That's it for me. We'll see if there's anything. Oregon goes to Purdue. Yes, we'll absolutely talk about these spoiler makers. We can move on down to our next set of games. Penn State USC. I caught a little bit of this one as it was going on, and USC, this to me, if you didn't catch it last year, had all of the vibes of Washington USC in the Coliseum, and different styles, because this was Michael Penix, Caleb Williams, and they were going to throw it all over the yard, and they did. But USC was moving the ball, putting up yards, and Drew Aller, to his credit, I mean, I think you see the stat there, threw for almost 400 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, he put up a big performance, and USC has been criticized for their defense, but it was improved this year, and it kind of reared its ugly head that they were getting passed on down the field. But yeah, this is a lot like the Washington game from last year, Washington USC. It was pretty much, last one to have the ball and score wins, because the defenses were just letting big play after big play happen. And yeah, USC got out to a lead, and Penn State, you can see there, James Franklin through those second and third quarters, just grinding to keep themselves in this game and make it close. And then both kickers had a chance in overtime. USC missed their kick. Penn State put it through, and I saw some fans saying, oh, it was a whiteout in the Coliseum, and they took it wasn't. It was a lot of Penn State fans, don't get me wrong, but it's not like Penn State whited out the stadium. Still a huge win. USC, no matter how their season is going, they're one of the big premier brands in college football. If it's like the same as Washington beating a down Michigan team last week, it's still a big win, even if Michigan's not necessarily playing well. Couple more people traveling in. Skaven, yes, good evening to you, my friend. We're just talking some Big Ten football going on. It was a weird week. It was either like a blowout or like a game absolutely down to the wire. There weren't really too many games that were kind of, you're down by 7 to 10 points going into the fourth. A conundrum about the Iowa locker room Pepto pick. Yes, absolutely. Illini said, very real outcome, expanded conference. You can have no letdowns week after week. You have to bring it. Yeah, the schedule, you look at everyone's schedule, and traditionally in our previous conferences, you'd say, oh, this team got a favorable schedule. This team, if someone had to play Ohio State and Michigan, or Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State in the old Big Ten East, it's no wonder Maryland and Rutgers had such a rough time there. There are no easy paths. Every game is difficult, even against teams like Purdue that took Illinois to the wire, and we can touch on that one. This one was old school West Coast, Big 12, no defense, all gas, no brakes football. And it was crazy to me because Illinois played so well. They've traditionally had really good secondaries and just good disciplined teams that can tackle, that can would keep them in games even against big time opponents. And they've been scoring this year. They've looked really, really strong. But oh my gosh, you were out to a lead. I want to say it was 27-3. And I think they took their eye off the ball. I think they took their foot off the gas, and they let Purdue just run crazy trick plays and reverses. And they broke open 2 40-yard touchdown passes. It was just wild to watch. And I think that kind of shocked Illinois. It took them a while to kind of clamp down and get back in the game. And they held on at the very end, made a sack, when they're going for the Hail Mary play. But, man, Illinois, you almost got spoiler makered right there in your own building. I know we also always hear about people going to West Lafayette, and no matter how bad Purdue is, they're the spoiler makers. But Illinois dodged a bullet there. Illini Ted, I don't know how nervous you were on that last drive, but yeah, Purdue had 9 passing yards and then decided to let him air it out. Yeah, absolutely. It was weird. Illinois jumped up, comfortable lead. And I think that maybe says more about Purdue, that they've had much higher potential than they've shown so far this year. And their play calling or coach has been holding them back. If you're having a down season, just uncork it. Let the kid, sling it down the field. He has an incredible arm for what I can tell, but man, it was just pass after pass after pass being broken open and Illinois kind of losing defensive contain. We'll get into the games coming up, but there's a certain spoiler maker effect that a certain Moen After Dark called before the season. He thought it may happen to the Duckies going into West Lafayette next week. And I wasn't so sure, but there's a glimmer of hope that Oregon could kind of have a letdown similar to Washington coming off playing Michigan. They could have a letdown coming off playing Ohio State. I'm just a purple hat wearing Washington fan here, but you never know. This is a super deep conference, and it's looking really tough for anyone to come out of this undefeated by the end. And moving on down, we had two very, very close games. We'll go to Minnesota UCLA first because we'll get to the big one very, very last. Minnesota UCLA. UCLA jumped out 10-0 lead. Minnesota, after halftime, I don't know what PJ Fleck did, but he just uncorked it. Brosmer was throwing downfield for once, and they finally started moving the ball. Like, UCLA, no disrespect, they're not good. They're not a good team. However, they have athletes. They're in Los Angeles, as our coach reminded us, as Deshaun Foster reminded everyone, they are in Los Angeles. But despite the fact that UCLA is in USC's shadow, they get 4- and 5-star kids to go to that school, even if they're terrible, because of who they are and where they are. They always have athletes, and if you don't watch out for them, they can bite you. They can make plays down the field. Now, Ethan Garbers, the quarterback for UCLA, has tons of ability, but he makes way too many mistakes. And I should know that because he was at Washington before he transferred to UCLA. And we saw the same thing. He's, 6'4", he's built just like a standard quarterback and can make all the throws in the world. But holy cow, he just absolutely doesn't know. He doesn't know how to put it all together and make the smart play instead of the spectacular play sometimes. Illini Ted touching back on his game. We're without Xavier Scott, who's been our everything defensive back, showed a lot in the second half. Yeah, I mean, injuries are definitely creeping up on teams. Again, call it going into the excuse booth. But, I don't think there's a single fully healthy team left in the Big Ten, and injuries certainly creeped up in the Washington game as I was watching. It's especially when you get them at critical positions, it's starting to test the depth of these teams, and you're just going into a meat grinder every single week. Getting back to Minnesota UCLA, Brosmer made plays, and PJ Fleck, man, he's like jumping up and down and running down the sidelines and jumping in. Like, it's big. You're winning in Los Angeles. I'm sure they had tons of fancy highfalutin alumni that live in the LA area going to the game for Minnesota. But man, if you're trying to get out of that bottom quarter, bottom third tier of the Big Ten, step into the mid region where you're competing for bowl games and possibly more in the future, you got to be putting away teams like UCLA, even on the road. And I get the hypocrisy for me that I'm saying, oh, these teams are struggling going cross country, but UCLA is fighting for that last spot in the conference. You should not be having to come back against them, PJ Fleck. Got to elevate a little bit more, but strong win for Minnesota, big road win in the Rose. You made it to the Rose Bowl, Gopher fans. So take some solace in that. The Rose Bowl, as we traditionally knew it, may be dead, but you got your Rose Bowl win. Tony Lashin adding in 3 turnovers, 10 penalties. Minnesota 0 turnovers, 4 penalties. Yeah, absolutely. Penalties have killed. Penalties can absolutely turn a game, and we all complain as fans about my team got screwed. This call was bad. That call was bad. I haven't been super impressed with the consistency of Big Ten refs. I haven't seen a game where I thought it was just totally rigged one side or the other. Like, maybe you see a call that's pretty egregiously bad. I just think they've been really inconsistent. I haven't seen too many games where I thought it was officiated kind of pretty consistent and pretty square top to bottom. So that's just my take on how the refereeing has been. Illini Ted, teams like Minnesota and the Illini still trying to learn consistently win games. Yeah, I mean, especially Minnesota, like you're still well in it. You still could, get a couple of wins here and do some good stuff. But Illinois is right there. Like, yeah, you haven't necessarily played anyone yet, but we don't know who the good teams are, as been evidenced by this year. Like, look at Indiana. Indiana 6-0. Like, they were the first ones to get to 6-0. That's crazy. Like, you think oh, this team's good, this team's bad. Tony Lashin, absolutely fair shot here. Shots fired, but it's well deserved. Winning on the road is hard. Just look at Washington. Yep, absolutely. Winning on the road is hard. They lost a close one in Piscataway, and they lost again this week. And unfortunately, I think they have one more faraway road game in a few weeks' time. They have to go to Happy Valley for the whiteout to play Penn State, and I'll be praying for my mental health on that one. I'm not exactly optimistic about that. And perhaps even more so coming up for the Huskies, they have to go play Indiana, of all teams, who I thought, oh yeah, they got a good shot to win that game before the year. Now, man, it's tough sledding in the new Big Ten for everybody. But Minnesota, absolutely good win. And yes, like I absolutely agree with the line I said. Those teams that have been traditionally kind of in the middle to bottom third of the Big Ten, it's tough, but you got to put away the bad teams to elevate yourself into that kind of middle tier. And I will get to the big one at the very end. Northwestern Maryland. Maryland, what are you doing? I don't know how Mike Locksley, like, they're the undisputed national champs of August and September hype, but as soon as like the leaves turn on the trees or whatever, it's like they just forget how to play football. I don't understand. I don't understand why this is a thing with Maryland, that they always start out hot and they just completely fall off a cliff, because it's not even just the non-conference. In past years, even they've picked up big conference wins in the early season, first 2-3 conference games, and then they just absolutely crap the bed. Yeah, this is the reverse PJ Fleck. Mike Locksley, you want to be taken seriously and get into that 7-8-9 win. We're on the cusp of a Big Ten title challenger thing. Put away teams like Northwestern, and worse than that, don't let them come into your house and drop nearly 40 on you and you lose by multiple touchdowns. You're completely out of it. Like, I get Northwestern put up a ton of points in the fourth, but Northwestern had control of this game even going into the late stages of the third. Like, unacceptable for Maryland. Maryland fans, wherever you're out there, I know there's a few of them that hang out and follow our page. Man, you got to think about making a change from Locksley and go in a different direction, because this is like a consistent problem, it seems. Or Tony Lashin, yeah, Maryland looks completely lost. Absolutely, Maryland looks completely lost. I don't understand why, because they'll play, similar games and just wildly different results, completely based on, it seems, what month they're played in. Absolutely crazy. A couple more comments here. Illini said, disappointing that Big Noon crew is traveling to Memorial Stadium next Saturday. Yeah, I mean, we'll get to the games coming up in a second here, but they've had some interesting choices, I think, for where the Big Noon crew actually physically is. Like, they were in Eugene for Ohio State, Oregon, but the Big Noon game was like Washington, Iowa. So I think in the coming years they'll kind of straighten out the scheduling a little bit and kind of balance it out a little more. I will say, though, if you had high expectations and then you're maybe not doing so well on the season, like Washington, they just come out with the schedule and they're going to play Indiana at 9 a.m. in a few weeks. So that's their punishment for not getting bumped into a better time slot by playing, better football. Excuse me for one moment. I need a refreshing drink. Glenn Hanna, good to see you, my friend. I was surprised Ohio State didn't pressure Gabriel more. Yep, we can step right into that game. The one that everyone was talking about, the Big Ten title contender. In my mind, this absolutely mirrors what Washington, Oregon was last year. The two teams people were picking to win the conference, and there was a chance they could have a rematch. It lived up to the hype. It was an absolutely outstanding game, top to bottom. Like, I saw a comment, again, this is me kind of taking a shot at the teams a little bit, but they said, oh, it's the most expensive college football game ever played in terms of how much the rosters cost. Could be a $40 million game. It could. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. But this was two programs who Oregon is trying to basically be Ohio State in terms of the way they shape their program, the way they run their program, and the expectations they set. Obviously, they don't have the tradition of national championships, but in the modern era, Oregon is trying to compete with these blue blood level, high, big spending teams. And I think a lot of Ohio State fans experience what it's like to play in Autzen. It's not super fun all the time. Oregon fans are passionate, even though it's a small stadium. But oh my gosh, Dylan Gabriel was doing his special thing, like when he lit it up against Texas. He's making magic. He's in his mid-20s. He's like a seventh, eighth year player. But he's extremely athletic. They got all the dudes around him. And I thought this was poised for a Dan Lanning brain fart game where he should beat these top opponents. But weirdly, the way it ended, because there was the controversy with Howard sliding, and then there being 1 second. Was there a timeout? Wasn't there a timeout? Look, Ohio State fans, I get it. It's frustrating. You thought maybe you should have 1 second and a shot to win the game, but you should never have put yourself in that position. And there's this bugaboo with Ryan Day that he can't win some big ones. So it's funny because that was kind of Lanning's thing. It was like the battle of two guys that can they win the big one. And Lanning came out on top, and I'm going to call it now. I do think this is a Big Ten title game rematch, and I think Ohio State pulls it off in the rematch. It's subject to change, but that's my prediction as it stands right now. So you can hold me to it later and make fun of me again. That's fine. Earl Carr, hello. Will BYU and Washington hook up again? Need to schedule more games? I would love to. I see a trend away from scheduling Power 5 opponents. And the only thing I think it would be tough specifically with Washington is they're going to, for the foreseeable future, they're going to play the Apple Cup. And I think it's going to turn in both for Oregon and Washington. I think their rivalry games are going to turn into like how Cyhawk is, where it's a non-conference, but it's played every year. That's my prediction. So I think picking up a second power team in the non-conference like BYU would be really tough. I'd love to see it. We could call it the Puka Nakua Bowl, but it might be a little tough going forward for Washington to add power non-conference opponents. Harry Austin, good evening. Good to see you, my friends. BYU has some Among Us O tackles. Yes, they tap into that West Coast Islander community for some very large individuals on their offensive lines. Earl Carr, what do you think? Showing Big Noon Saturday. What do you think of the game? Oh yeah, the crew for Big Noon at LES was awesome. Cosmo, your mascot's doing all sorts of wild stuff. He's skydiving and jumping through flaming hoops. It was a lot of fun. I get that everyone kind of makes fun of it. No, I wouldn't say make fun of it, but it's kind of looked at as, you're the wannabe game day, and they're trying to differentiate themselves a little bit, but it was good. I liked it. I think they need to kind of branch out and build their own identity and give people a reason to watch it instead of game day. It's just tough because college game day has been such a staple for so long. It was so unique when it started. Let's see. Earl Carr. Kids are caving to stay. Students, a Friday night. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, BYU is like my shock team in the Big 12. Sorry to get off topic in the Big 10, but holy cow, BYU. You were making some waves in there. But anyways, getting back, Ohio State, Oregon, just in a wrap-up. It was an awesome game. Dylan Gabriel, I see, talked about as a Heisman contender, like even as a Duck hater. Like, yeah, he's absolutely in the Heisman conversation. I think he's had some games where the stats on paper looked really good, but if you watch the game, it was kind of off. The Boise game comes to mind. But if he shined in the big moment, the whole nation was watching that game. It was one of the most anticipated games going into the season. And that's where you need to show up. That's how you get a Heisman, is playing well under the bright lights. So he's absolutely in the conversation. If Oregon runs the table and wins the Big Ten, I think there's going to be a pretty strong push for him to be the Heisman Trophy winner. Ohio State, I am not sure what your schedule is like going forward, but it's one loss. You're still firmly in the at-large discussion, even if you don't win the Big Ten at this point. and that's maybe the good side of the 12-team playoff. In previous years, you'd say Ohio State, oh shoot, one loss. If they lose again, man, they might not get to the Big Ten title game. They might not get to the playoff. No, you're still firmly in the at-large discussion. I think it's awesome to keep more people invested as far as getting to the playoff for longer. It's. Oh, sorry. I apologize. I'm kind of screwing myself up on the back end here. But yeah, I think there's certainly a lot more intrigue for teams where you have the potential to get 3 or 4 teams from your same conference. Like a Penn State. Penn State, you could say, oh, well, shoot, we got to jump in Ohio State or Oregon to get in the Big Ten title game. Maybe not. You're run the table, 1 loss, 2 loss. You're right there talking about an at-large bid in the college football playoff. Yes, you would love the bye for being the champion, but it makes a lot more games a lot more interesting. Tony Lash on Ohio State schedule is not the easiest. I'm not sure who they have coming up. Possibly we can look at that in a little bit. But I will say who is coming up. We can hop ahead to the Week 8 games. Give me one moment here. Boom, there we go. And right leading it off, we talked about it just briefly in good old Ross-Ade Stadium, West Lafayette. Go away, ads, please. Need to get that ad blocker updated. Oregon, Purdue. Oregon, do not have the letdown. You are far too good. No disrespect to Purdue. You are far too good to be losing to a team like Purdue. If you have kind of an off game where Purdue covers, but you still win, that's fine. I think the line is I don't know, 27. That's a strong line. Originally, I saw it was actually more than 30, but I think the way that Purdue this past week shows they have a little bit of fight in them. But it'll be tough to make those down the field, just chuck it up and pray for what happens against Oregon. They have crazy athletes. They can make interceptions and all that stuff. So Oregon, take care of business. I'll be praying for you to lose, but you're a great team. You have great athletes. And do not let the spoiler maker curse become real. Like I said, it's 3-10 cross country, though. So this, I think, is Oregon's first real road test. I got everybody touching back on Big Noon. Funniest part is the show is that Urban was getting booed out of the building. Yeah, that's not shocking. I mean, they booed Kyle Whittingham and he went to BYU. So BYU fans, they're very polite to your face. They don't say hurtful things. They don't throw stuff at you that I've ever seen. But they'll give it to you if you're an away fan there. I know that they'll give you a smile and a handshake after the game. And I know they give the away fans ice cream. But during the game, they are vicious. Moving on, you got Nebraska at Indiana. That will be a super interesting one. I didn't see the time slot for that game. Okay, Saturday 9 a.m. So it is the Big Noon game. It's the kickoff game right on Fox. Indiana, you are at home. You've got Nebraska, Raiola, who have been up and down, but mostly have pretty good expectations. If you want to be legit, Indiana, you want the whole country to turn their head and be like, oh man, these guys are for real. Like Kirk Cignetti, if you want to win that Coach of the Year, beat Nebraska and look good doing it. It won't be easy, but as it stands right now, I think Indiana wins a very close one. I do. I think Indiana wins close, and their hype train keeps on rolling. So now that I've officially called it, bet against me because I'm almost always wrong, especially when I bet for my Huskies. Tony Lashton saying I got Oregon. Yeah, but do you have Oregon in the points? This is one of those kind of games. Like, yes, the absolute upset is kind of crazy, but if you don't bet them with the points, then it's not quite as fun. I would take Purdue in the points, I would say. I could see Oregon having a letdown points-wise and still winning fairly comfortably. All right, moving on down, we got UCLA making the longest trip you can possibly make in the Big Ten, all the way to Piscataway to face Rutgers. Rutgers, get right game. You had a rough one at Wisconsin. You still got Monongai. You still got Kaliak-Manis who can make a few passes when you need to. Get right game. It's UCLA in your home building. Run the ball all over them. Take no prisoners. And Monongai can have 30 carries in this game. I mean, obviously you worry about injuries, but if that dude's making yards, give him the ball and let him run and just drain the life out of UCLA. This is your get right game. If you drop 2 back-to-back, you're wasting away all that good potential starting out the season. So don't pull a Maryland, and when the going gets tough, you fold. Keep on trucking Rutgers, and I think you'll be right up there talking about a top 5 or 6 team in the Big Ten as we move down the stretch. Wisconsin and Northwestern coming off of big wins, possibly an unheralded game. I do love it's the Lanny and Sharon Martin Lakeside Facility, Evanston, Illinois. Go sailgating up for your Wisconsin Northwestern game. I think this is the last one, and they'll transition to Wrigley after, if I'm not mistaken. But same thing, both teams coming off big wins. Wisconsin's been up and down. I don't know what to make of them. I don't. They look super good against some teams and just inconsistent, I guess, is the proper good English word to describe it. When they're good, they're good. When they're not, they're not. I mean, I get you played Alabama and everything, and that's a tough out for anyone, but just consistency, Wisconsin. Work on your consistency. Northwestern's beatable. Washington took care of them. Like, yes, they beat Maryland in kind of an off game, but handle business. I guess I'm going to call this week for teams based on the schedule I'm seeing. You know, you got Oregon, Rutgers, Wisconsin. Handle business. This is your handle business week. UCLA has improved every week. Get the win this weekend. Really, get the win at Rutgers. That would probably be the most shocking in terms of the going cross-country trend to break, because, as someone said, 3 of the 3 wins out of 13 games that have been played that are cross-country, 2 of them have been against UCLA. So there's been one kind of true road win, and it was overtime, Penn State at USC. Like, that's what it took. The only other one is an overtime game. So cross-country is pretty rough. I can't dance with you on that one, Tony. I'm going to have to take Rutgers. I think Monungai just grinds on them. Let's go Wildcats. Yep, absolutely. Got our standard Wisconsin hate and chat. No surprise there. Underrated one underneath. I think that this is your contender-pretender game. The winner of this game, you're a contender. The loser of this game, you were a pretender all along. I'm talking to you, Michigan, because although losing to Iowa hurts, the secondary effect of having all of the Hawkeye fans absolutely trolling the daylights out of Michigan fans for not losing to Washington by 10 at home, that was great. I enjoyed that. So, like, I get a little bit of solace out of the fact that Michigan still loses, even though nothing happened this week. Yeah, Tony Lashin, Illini, Ted, it's your time to shine. Yeah, knock them out of the rankings. I don't think they deserve to be there. Like, I mean, Washington's an okay team, and they beat you by 10. Like, you got the brakes beat off you by Texas. Like, Michigan, I'm sorry, you're frauds. You're not in the Big Ten title discussion. And guess what? That's coming from me. My team, we are absolutely nowhere near the Big Ten title discussion like I thought, we had an outside shot of at the beginning of the year. I'll call balls and strikes fair and square as best I can. Michigan, you're frauds. You don't belong in the top 25. And I don't know if, I want to take Illinois. I'll leave it up in the air. I just like I said, contender, pretender game. The winner of this game, like, you're a legit, dark horse contender for that Big Ten title game, or even like a dark horse playoff team. Illinois, what a statement it would be to put away Michigan at home. It'd be absolutely massive. Yeah, not very often we're supposed to beat Michigan. Yeah, I mean, it's strange being, slightly favored, or I guess in this case, who is favored? See, Illinois +3, so they're still giving it to Michigan by 3. That, to me, that's a pick'em game. That's kind of how I feel about it currently. Yeah. Grizz Rex, don't sleep on Michigan off a bye. That's true. Yeah. Rested team. Illinois had a really close one against Purdue. Pretty emotional. You get the win. It's tough because you are teed up for the letdown, but I do think you're still getting fired up to play Michigan. I think Illinois is going to give them everything they got. And like Alex Orji or Tuttle, like, I don't even know who Michigan's wheeling out their quarterback. Like, Michigan quarterbacks just don't throw the ball. And yes, Donovan Edwards, he's a monster. Like, the Big Ten still has a stable of running backs, and he can still break one open down the field. But if you just limit them on the runs, and that's how Washington was successful in beating them, limiting them on the damaging runs. You give up 5, you give up 7, eventually you make a couple plays and get a stop. But, if you take away their passing game and they're one-dimensional, it is a lot easier to wear out Michigan. And Illinois can score. Illinois has dudes that can score. Like Mason Graham inside is still super terrifying. You got to get the ball out quick. But there is a path to victory for the Illini. So don't fret, my friends. I think it'll be a great game. That's certainly one I have circled. Take UI all day. Michigan has major issues. True. Yeah, they do. But no easy days here in this conference. That's under the big lights on CBS. You get the whole country watching. Statement win, put away Michigan, and then we won't have to hear about them as much the rest of the season. That'll be kind of nice. Line, I said that Purdue result sets the initial line. Probably would have been favored by 3, took care of business. That's fair. Yeah, I mean, you could get a little bit of recency bias in the Vegas betting. Keep in mind, people, that's the biggest fallacy for everyone. Vegas lines are not set based on who they think is going to win. They're set to split the betting 50-50. That's how Vegas works. So if you're getting good vibes, Ted, if you're not able to make it to this game, I know it'll be appointment viewing for you. And this will certainly be a fun one. Not super. I don't see a ton of ranked versus ranked coming up. So Earl Carr, BYU Cowboys, 8:15 Eastern Friday night. Ooh, oh man. I know that we're at a Big 12 sidebar, but man, Oklahoma State does not look good. But BYU is just making noise. They're sneaking in there. They're like the sneakiest top 15 ranked team I've ever heard of. It's pretty insane. But yeah, Michigan, Illinois, and then we move on. USC traveling all the way to College Park to play Maryland. Mike Loxley, good luck, because your reputation precedes you in these October, November games, and you got kind of probably a pissed off USC team that feels like they might have let one go against Penn State. They're coming cross country, and I think USC wins. I think USC breaks our trend of teams going cross country. Like Maryland, unfortunately, your get-right game is going against a team that's probably pretty angry and feels like they want to run the score up on you and have some athletes to do it. So I think USC kind of takes that one. And Maryland, wasting other good starts. Quit wasting good starts. Get good finishes. Don't lose back-to-back weeks. And closing out, we got Iowa at Michigan State. Michigan State is not good. Jonathan Smith's a good coach. I like Jonathan Smith. He coached for the Huskies a few years back as an assistant. He worked wonders with the Oregon State program. Everyone knows kind of the run they went on. They beat Oregon a couple years ago. But it took him years to build that program. And I know everyone says, his coffers, he's got better resources at Michigan State. That program was in such just shambles when he took it over. You got kids leaving left and right, and it was just absolutely brutal with everything going on. I think Iowa's going to revert to Iowa form, and they're going to win a low scoring game. Unless Aiden Childs is zinging it up, but man, I'll be fine being the only team that gives up more than 30 to Iowa in the whole year. That's fine. It hurts a little bit, but I'll get over it one day. Tony, getting back to the USC thing, 3-0 for the West Coasters. So you think Oregon takes care of business? I'm assuming you mean straight up. I would say the bold call on that one is certainly UCLA Rutgers, because Oregon should have zero excuse. Oregon should lose to the spoiler makers, even though that's their reputation precedes them. But Purdue's coming off, a heartbreaking loss at the end of that game after fighting all the way back. So Oregon, I think, is an easy win. Who knows if they cover, but it's an easy win. USC, I think, would be a close win, but I do think they get it over Maryland. Apologies for the background noise. I have a slightly busy road behind my house. But man, UCLA Rutgers. Tony, if you're feeling that, going 3-0, take a couple 5 shekels down to the sports bet and throw some money down on it, because I bet you get pretty darn good odds just for including UCLA in that bet. Tony Lashin, Iowa, Michigan State, rock fight. Yeah, I think they revert to type, and you're talking about an under type game, low scoring. Washington totally blew it, and the game totally got away from them. They just let it break open. I think Michigan State's they're certainly, even though it's a new coaching staff, a lot of their players are used to playing the more traditional Big Ten style grinded out football. Aiden Shiles is talented, but they're just not there yet. Michigan State's not there. So Iowa gets a close win, I think, in that one. If we take care of business, have another ranked versus ranked traveling to Eugene. That would be absolutely incredible stuff to see, like an easily, I'd say top 20 for sure or higher ranked Illinois traveling all the way to Eugene to take on the Duckies. Whoa. Yeah, Illini's fourth ranked in 5 games. That's, man, the schedules on the back end are rough. Yeah, Illinois hasn't had a ton of, like, super marquee games, but man, you can't look past a Eugene. But again, that's what beating a Michigan can do for you. It puts you in that next conversation where you're kind of the new hot trendy guy that's kind of stepping up the pecking order. So take care of business this week, and then it'll be a lot of fun speculating how you would fare against the vaunted Oregon Duckies. But yeah, I'd say just so my recap on them. I mean, I think it's going to be a pretty fun week. You get a couple of teams on bye this week, Ohio State, obviously. But man, it's coming up. And just because I'm a little bit of a schedule peeker, I wanted to look 2 weeks out at a couple of those games, if it'll load for me. Perhaps it's not. That's okay. We'll call it good there. Perhaps it's the universe telling me that I don't need to look ahead 2 weeks. But absolutely, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, everybody, I did want to take a peek at the AP Top 25 because I do understand the argument, and I kind of heard this after the weekend, that Oregon should be ranked number 1. They've had the best schedule, even though Texas has absolutely handled people. There was a strong argument that Oregon should be number 1 over Texas, and that even Ohio State should be lower. I'd say the more surprising thing to me is that they did put Penn State, kind of a squeaking by win. They still put them over Ohio State. It's almost like they had to punish Ohio State a little bit and drop them more. But you're talking about a 1-point win that came down to the final seconds for both teams. And Ohio State was playing number 2 and Penn State's playing a team that wasn't ranked. So I think that I would reverse Penn State, Ohio State, but otherwise the order's fine. Alabama, people are going to call me an Alabama hater, but you took it to the wire against South Carolina and won on a very questionable touchdown. They don't deserve to be at 7. Like, this is a battered Pac-12 fan that is so used to the teams in my conference being undervalued in the SEC. Like, it's like, Vandy beats Alabama and everyone says, oh, the SEC is really deep this year. But if, like teams like Indiana going 6-0, oh, the Big Ten's down. The top teams aren't as good. Michigan lost to Washington. Big Ten's down. Not, oh, the Big Ten's really deep. It's just funny how that works. But the top teams, I can't argue too much. I think Alabama's lower. I'd flip Ohio State, Penn State. I thought is super, like, if you took teams 9 through 25 and showed them to people before the season, they wouldn't believe you, because I think this is the first time in 60 years both Army and Navy have been ranked at the same time, something crazy like that. It's, I've been kind of a traditionalist when it comes to this NIL era and crazy rosters and stuff, but it's producing some crazy results. Teams that are jumping up that we haven't seen for a long time, and other teams you had high expectations like Florida State that had just fallen down. So Big 12 is holding strong too. You got BYU and Iowa State. Everyone thought it was going to be Utah or Kansas State or Oklahoma State. But my goodness, it's an interesting top 25. I've always been a fan of, you don't come up with polls until, 5-6 weeks into the season at least, or at least have you played, 3 conference games. So to me, this is where the rubber hits the road and the real teams kind of shine. But you look down there at the bottom, Illinois, you take care of business, beat Michigan. You're shooting into that second and possibly that, second row from bottom, or possibly that middle row. And Michigan's going bye-bye. They're not going to be in the top 25. So do us all a favor, Illini, get a little bit of vengeance on the cheaters for us. Michigan fans, I know you can call me salty. It's okay. I don't actually hate you, but I think you're having a rough year. I think it's been a rough transition in the post Harbaugh era. You have a national championship though, so just have a little bit of solace in that. Or Glenn Hanna, Texas low points per game is pretty amazing. Points per game allowed, yeah. Red River was totally one-sided. It was actually kind of disappointing. I expected Texas to win, but it wasn't as exciting as it was in past years, even when one team was heavily favored. Texas, Georgia, Bama, Tennessee can shake up the SEC. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to make of it. Given what we've seen about Bama and Georgia, and then Bama losing to Vandy and Bama coming close to South Carolina, I think Texas might handle Georgia, and then do they keep them all up there because it's just a bunch of ranked teams beating each other, even though some of them maybe aren't up to expectations? I don't know. But Texas is really starting to separate themselves. And I can't even call who they're going to play for the SEC championship at this point. It's kind of such a blender. Alabama, LSU both getting the SEC bias push. Yeah, certainly. Bama after Vandy not being dropped out of the top 10 was pretty gross. I thought that was ridiculous. Again, you call me a purple hat wearing Kalen DeBoer hater, but and that's not even a shot at Vandy, but you got to put a team like that away. They were super undisciplined and just totally broke down in the end. You gave up a ton of points. I don't think LSU's been super crazy impressive either. Tennessee is another bad loss. If you do have Bama, Tennessee, and Bama takes care of business, Tennessee is just on a downward trajectory. The SEC is deep. It's like the Big Ten. There's tons of really good teams, and teams that used to be in kind of that, second, third, fourth spot in their conference. You're getting pushed down the pecking order a little bit, depending on who's above you. Tony Lashin, I can't join you on this one, although I should be of split minds because my dad's side of the family were mostly Army and my mom's side were mostly Navy, but I was in the Marine Corps, part of the Department of the Navy, so go Navy, beat Army. I hope that that's an undefeated game or a one-loss apiece game. It'd be absolutely incredible. Incredible stuff. My neighbor's honking at me for some reason. He must hate my terrible takes. But that's all right. It's been an interesting week. Next week, I hope Becky and Moen were able to join us. I got a good chat with our friend Immaculate after the Iowa game, and he was much more gracious than some about the fact that I picked Washington to win big against Iowa. Just goes to show I'm in the cooler with Greg Flugar. I'm Pickles the cooler for some reason. Thankfully, I don't actually bet real money on sports ever. That's kind of just a rule that I have because I think I'll always be wrong. But if you have any last questions, comments, concerns, fears, or doubts, I didn't have a chance to look at kind of the other massive games coming up this week, but I think I can touch on that right fast. Okay, didn't quite pull it up full screen, but I did see Big Ten power rankings. You could argue power rankings are more useless than the other ones, but yeah, see, this is the correct order to me where you have Ohio State ahead of Penn State. But man, the order of this is crazy. Michigan's still way too high. Washington deserves to be where they are. And Purdue's better than UCLA. I'm going to call that right now. I don't know. I don't recall if they played or are going to play this year. Beat your kids' sandbox on UCLA. Man. Yeah. I don't think I'm good for it, Tony. I'm not going to break my rule. If I'm going to break my rule about sports betting, which I never do, it's definitely not going to be betting on the Bruins to go across country and take care of business against Rutgers. A statement I never thought I'd say, but okay. But yeah, it's been an interesting week. Tony bet. Yeah. I'm not brave enough, unfortunately, but it's been an awesome week. Other than the fact that the Ducks won and the Huskies lost, but it was an incredible week of football. You had overtime games out the wazoo. And I think no matter what week you have in this conference, I think the fact that you have more, I don't want to say watchable games. I don't mean to be disrespectful to other teams, but you just have more teams. You have more opportunities for great games. And I think that they've done a pretty good job selecting the right games for the right time slots. Um, I'm suddenly not a fan of playing at 9 a.m. local time going cross country. The 9 a.m. part's fine because I can have brunch and football. That's totally cool with me out here on the West Coast. But it seems to be a bit of an issue for the Huskies and others. So Tony, you're going out on the limb here. Absolutely. I think you've got the bold call of the week, picking UCLA straight up, going to Rutgers, but it should be another interesting one. I'm going to have my eyeball squarely, Illini Ted. I'm going to be right there with you with my eyeball squarely on that Michigan game. But we certainly got some good ones coming up. Yeah, appreciate you sticking with me as I'm going solo. Hope Becky will be back next week, as far as I know. Possibly Moen will stop by and grace us with his expertise. He's not cowering away from wearing the duck hat this week, so we got to hold him to it. He's a man of his word. But I appreciate you guys joining me. A little bit of a shorter show as Motorbike goes by. Thank you for joining us here on the Big Ten Mafia Show. We will see you next Monday, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific on the College Football Network. We got Big 12 Mafia, big freaking Friday show. You got your standard Moen After Dark, but man, I know it's a Big 10 show, but the Big 12 show is going to be pretty rowdy this week. Wild Ute and Bomber have had some quite spicy conversations about the state of the program for both the Utes and BYU. So we have awesome shows coming out this week. And if not, I will see you next Monday. Thank you so much for joining us. Peace out, everybody.